Yes, thank you, convener. Just a couple of points. The meeting's to be recorded to comply with Local Government Act. Members are unmuted, and if there's any issues of unmuting yourself, please raise your blue hand, excluding Councillor McLaren, of course. Can you please advise when you're leaving the meeting, and any questions or points to be raised, can you please select the raise hand option on the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Right. Apologies or substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor Ben Laurie and substituted today by Councillor Derek Warren.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. And before I take these, I got to ask a question of David Thompson. David, could you unmute, please?
You know, I don't think David Thompson is with us yet.
Yes.
Oh, is he?
Right, David,
Yes, sorry.
I've got a question for you. If you don't have this right away, I can email you the email that Julie Bell sent to me. It's a letter she's received from the Standards Commission. It's a copy of a letter dated 13th of March 2015. And it reads, and I'll just read the essential bit. The Standards Commission for Scotland has decided to grant a specific dispensation under the Councillors' Code of Conduct for councillors who have been appointed by their council to be a member of an integration joint board. This is so councillors, as voting members of the integration joint board, do not have to declare their interest when discussions on general health and social care issues arise, and can participate in discussions and voting on these issues. That seems to indicate to me that they don't have to declare an interest if there's anything relative to the integration joint board. Is that correct?
That's correct, convener. I've got the same letter in front of you, and it is, as you say, a dispensation that means that interests don't require to be declared in relation to memberships of integration joint boards.
Right. And also, as a second line, it says similar dispensation for members of health boards.
That's correct, convener.
Right. Okay. For the sake of clarity, I think it would be useful if members declared they had a specific dispensation, just for the record in the minute, but they wouldn't have to fill in any forms. Would that be acceptable, David?
That's a sensible approach, convener.
Right. Everybody's heard that. We're now on to declarations of interest. Can I take those of you who are on the integrated joint board and the health board just to note your specific dispensations?
Okay, that would be me, particularly on item 7.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yes, on IGB and the health board.
Right. Anyone else on that? Okay. David, does this dispensation also apply to Angus Alive?
Convener, I'm not aware that it does that, and I'm not aware that the Standards Commission have issued that dispensation.
Right, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, are there any more declarations of interest?
Yes, convener. I think we got advice from the head of legal that we had a specific dispensation according to her reading of the Standards Commission rules, and she gave us that advice in an email several weeks ago. So I don't mind today declaring an interest and putting in a form, but I think we need to get that one sorted because it is a bit of a faffle if we don't need to do it.
Can I suggest that we just record your interest and you've got a specific dispensation similar to the integrated joint boards and health boards, and if you need to fill in a form, the clerk can get back to you and get you to fill it in later.
That sounds very satisfactory. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. The same convener. It's item 7, report 20820. I've actually sent in a form already, but I won't do it in future.
Right. Well, we'll have to wait and just make sure that's clarified, Councillor Devine, but I think you're probably okay to do that in future. Right. Anything else on declarations of interest? No, let's go to the minute of the previous meeting. Is that the correct minute? Is that agreed? Item 4, internal audit activity update. Can I ask Kathy Wiley to take us through this, please?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with the 3 non-standard items that are on page 13 here, just to take these out of the way before we get into the normal activity update. So item 4 there is around the audit charter. We would normally do an annual review of the charter. There hasn't been any new guidance on this, and so I'm proposing that we delay the review until the SIAS external review is complete, just in case anything comes out of that that we would need to update the charter for. And in the meantime, on page 37, I noticed that there were a couple of places in a footnote where the audit manager's job title hadn't been updated, so I've just updated that in the meantime, and we'll come back to this after the SIAS review is complete.
Okay.
If that's okay. Item 5 is just to let you know that the housing regulator had updated a few things, including extending deadlines for producing the annual assurance statement from October to November, and the deadline for the reporting of performance to tenants and service users had been extended from October to December. However, having spoken to our housing service, they're planning to report to the original deadlines, but it's just to make you aware of that. And the final thing there on page item 6 is just to draw your attention to a publication from Audit Scotland. It's a COVID-19 guide for audit and risk committees, and it has some really useful questions in there about the kinds of things that you should be thinking about and maybe asking about if you don't already know about them, covering internal controls and assurance, financial management and reporting, governance and risk management. I think, having looked at this, there's a number of reports that have already come to various council and committee meetings that would cover these questions, and obviously will continue to do so going forward. But we will bring a report to the next committee that will signpost some of these reports and update anything that's significant that you haven't already had any information on.
Right, on that one, before we move on, Kathy, can you send all members a link to the SharePoint so that we can go direct to it, please?
Yes, if you can organise that.
Let's go on with the rest of the report then.
Okay. So I'm on page 17 here, moving into page 18 where the table is. You'll recall from previous meetings that we had quite a significant amount of work that had been stalled as a result of COVID-19. We'd also had some new work that had been put in as a result of COVID-19. And so the table that starts on page 18 is just all the work that has been started, telling you where that is. Inevitably, things have moved on and some of these have changed slightly, but I'm not going to go into each individual one, although I'm happy to answer questions on any. There's just a couple I wanted to say something more about. One is on page 18, the Pupil Equity Fund. I've not forgotten that you've asked me to prioritise that, and we are actually in the process of revisiting the scope for that work because there was new guidance that came out around the use of that fund, and we want to just make sure that we've got the scope for that right, and that work will be restarting very shortly. And the other thing is on page 20, the SIAS external review. I had a meeting last Friday with the team that are undertaking that review, and they've recommenced that work on Monday this week, and they're planning to try and meet the deadlines to allow us to report that to the December committee. It will be quite tight, so we might not make that, but I'm hoping that we will, and if not, it'll come to, hopefully to the January meeting. Some of you might get some contacts around that, I'm not sure. I think Councillor King in particular, you're likely to get contacted by them. So if I move on to the items that we're reporting to you this time round, first one on page 22 is the business continuity planning and disaster recovery. This was a piece of work that was in the 1920 plan and had been delayed as a result of COVID-19 activity. We did previously report, I think to the last committee meeting,
the work that we had done that was in parallel with this around the IT resilience and disaster recovery, and that was a substantial assurance audit that we reported in August. Having looked at the work that we'd done up to the point when this was delayed, and also the fact that we'd had to invoke our plans as part of the COVID-19 response, we had a review of the scope for this and decided that actually, because of what we already knew and the activity that had already taken place, it didn't seem sensible to continue and complete that audit, because it wasn't really going to add much to what we already know about this. We've summarised the information that we've got there around looking at the policies and procedures and plans and the training and what have you that's been put in place, and the things that are going to be reviewed in light of what's been happening as a result of COVID-19. And I think that the conclusion at the bottom of page 23 is that based on the findings of what we've seen so far, we can give substantial assurance over the operation of business continuity and emergency planning procedures. There are action plans that are already in place from some of the self-evaluation that's taken place in the period since March. So we've only got one new action that we're proposing here. Most of the actions that have been identified are quite low risk things that they're more procedural, just around making sure things flow more smoothly. But we did identify that there is a single point of failure in the knowledge and experience of the manager, risk, resilience and safety. And there is some action in place already to try and expand the knowledge of other members of the team. But taken along with the resourcing of the emergency centre is something that obviously is a fluctuating need going forward. And we've previously reported that members of the internal audit team had been working in there on a seconded basis. They both came back to my team earlier this year, but actually one of them's back in there on an off and on basis just to offer support. And that's not necessarily sustainable long term, because obviously if he's working there, he's not undertaking audits. So we need to have a think about how that's going to work going forward. So we do have a recommendation that's been accepted around reviewing the resources in that service, just to make sure that we can continue to address the organisational needs during the current coronavirus pandemic and beyond. The next item that we're reporting here is payroll leavers and establishment changes. This was a piece of work that external audit agreed that they were going to place reliance on. And again, it's on page 25. The overall conclusion there was around substantial assurance, and that was around having up-to-date payroll guidance and procedures in place for processing leavers, that there were guidance for following up with directorates and payroll staff, that there were adequate procedures in place to detect, record and recover any overpayments that happened to former employees, that there was adequate IT security and information governance procedures in place around council leavers, and that there were adequate procedures around authorising and recording establishment changes. So as I said, it was substantial assurance, and although there are 5 recommendations, they're relatively they're not particularly high risk. There are some planned improvements that are underway around these areas, and some of the findings from this audit will be taken into consideration whilst the new firm step process for changes is being developed. So the level 2 recommendations are more around making sure that the procedures are brought up to date once these changes are in place, and just making sure that some of the checking that is being done is being recorded fully so that the audit trail is available. And the final thing that we're reporting today is the COVID-19 Food Fund emergency cash provision. Right at the outset of the pandemic, some cash was made available for emergency use by members of staff in dealing with members of the public. And we weren't very sure at the start of this just how much of that cash would be needed. In the end, at the top of page 28, you'll see that when we undertook the audit, only £490 had actually been spent. And by the time we completed this at the end of June, only £609 had been spent. So the risk here is very limited. What we identified was that although procedures were put in place and that the procedures that were put in place were acceptable, we did identify that not all of these procedures were followed in every case. I suspect that was probably because of the nature of some of the emergencies that people came across, but nonetheless, it would really be important in future in a similar situation for some of these procedures to be followed more fully. We haven't made recommendations because the use of this fund is no longer in place, but we will be putting some information on the corporate intranet just to remind people around some of the things that they should be thinking about when they're handling cash and recording the use of cash, just to make sure that we are following the procedures that we have properly. The one other thing that this piece of work was initially designed to look at was to make sure that there was some work in conjunction with welfare rights, just to make sure that there wasn't double dealing, if you like, in terms of how some of the responses were being undertaken. That didn't take place in the way that we had initially envisaged, but actually because of the low volume of cash that was actually paid out, I don't think that there was any risk there that there would have been significant overlap between the different routes for helping people. And then the final piece in this report is the implementation of the actions resulting from our internal audit and counter fraud activity. And there's only one I want to draw attention to is on page 30, the final 2017-18 priority 2 action that's left now is the one about updating information in the financial regulations. That financial regulation review is back underway again just now, so hopefully we'll be able to sign that recommendation off soon. But happy to answer any questions if anyone has anything.
Okay then, procedure please. Bids with the page numbers to questions. Anyone got any questions?
Yeah.
Councillor McLaren.
No, I have a comment, just a general comment.
Just a minute. I'll come back to that. Anyone got questions?
Yeah. I like Councillor King. I've got questions on page 17, 18, 19 and 21.
17, 18, 19 and 21.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes, page 20 and 28.
20 and 28.
3 and 28.
23 and 28.
Yeah.
Councillor Whiteside, did you have your hand up there?
Yes, just a general question.
Anyone else?
General question, Alec.
Okay, anyone else? Right, Councillor 1, page 17.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, can I just ask a question? It's actually one question on 17, 18, 19, and it's really to do with the amount of TBCs in it. And I understand, Kathy, you've given us a slight explanation on why maybe some of these don't have target dates on them. But would it not be an idea to have target dates on them and then to show the committee every 6 weeks or whatever how you're getting on at that point, and if it needs to slip, it needs to slip. But I'm counting there that out of 25 targets, there's 11 with TBC on it, which is quite a high amount, and it doesn't give me any kind of idea or comfort that, you know, we're going to get to that point whenever. Can I just ask you if that's something you can look at? Do you want me to do question for page 21 as well, or leave it until that's
just leave it on that one at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I would say that there's at least 5 of these on hold, maybe 6 of these on hold. But Kathy, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that by the time we bring in the next report to you, that we'll be able to start putting dates in there. One of the difficulties that we've had is that a lot of the people that we're dealing with have just not been able to give us any commitment to when they would be able to have capacity to deal with an audit. And because all the audits have been in that situation, it's been really, really difficult to try and plan things in. So Donna and I have been looking at the plan, and we've started trying to plot things back in again. And so hopefully we'll have some dates put in against these for the next meeting.
Okay. I've just commented that this is probably the worst situation I've seen for to be confirmed. Yeah. And that's wholly down to the situation we're in. Right, page 21.
Yeah. Very quick question on this one as well. It's to do with the whistleblowing disclosure for a council employee, not looking for any information on what actually the whistleblowing issue was. It's more that I'm asking, is the details and the investigation just about complete on this? And are we likely to face any kind of reputational damage from this one? Or I'm just conscious of what was in the Courier yesterday with Dundee City and their 15 whistleblowing disclosures, and it's just something that's concerning me at the moment. Thank you.
I think one of the things I would comment on, Councillor One, is this is an arm's length body, and we've got to let them do their own investigations and then report back to us. But I'll take advice from anyone else who's there.
Sorry, yeah, can I just add in that it does say actual council employee, but yeah, I understand that it is IGB.
Yeah.
If I could give you,
it's the okay, yeah, carry on.
If I could give you an update, it's been fully investigated by the Health and Social Care Partnership, but it was on green paper at IGB, so we're go no further than that. It hasn't reached its conclusion yet, so until it does, there'll be no more information coming forward, but it's been fully investigated.
I think we have to leave the IJB to deal with its own internal stuff, even though it may be one of our employees. It's within their area of expertise or responsibility. Anyone else on that one? No? Right, Councillor Devine, page 23.
Councillor Bell has got something to say on that, I think.
Okay, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I just.
Oh, yes, sorry, I'm not looking at the hands.
When the whistleblowing policy review came up previously, I had asked about that, and the chief executive had said that because there are two cohorts of staff, there's NHS and there's council staff, and two policies, they were looking at both those policies and bringing together something more holistic in terms of good practice that properly reflected the areas that people worked in, rather than have two separate policies. So I had asked that before.
Right.
Convener, I think Catherine Lindsay wants to come in on this matter.
That's just what I was going to say. That while Councillor Bell was speaking, Catherine Lindsay came up. So can we allow Catherine Lindsay to make a comment, please?
Thank you very much, Convener. It's just to provide some assurance to the meeting that as the Chief Social Officer, I am cited on the progress and the outcomes thus far. I can also confirm that there has been multi-agency scrutiny on a confidential basis of the findings of the report. It does pertain to local authority statutory duties, and therefore I am keeping abreast of the progress in terms of the actions that are being undertaken to address the issues arising.
Fine. Councillor Whiteside, is this on this item or is this on your general comment? You've got your hand up.
Oh, just on the general comment. Sorry, it's been up since
right.
you asked. I'll put it down now.
Councillor Devine, then, page 23.
Yeah, this is just a very small one. It's under we established that, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points down. Exercises have been carried out locally with other partners within the local resilience partnerships. Does that include, I'm just wondering if anybody can tell me, does that include community councils? It seems to me that it would be a good thing to be involving them in this. Do you want me, oh no, you don't want me to go into 28, do you?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I can't answer that question. I can go back and check and find out about that, and I can certainly pass that on.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was anybody else who could maybe illuminate me.
Convener, it's Mark Armstrong here.
Coming in there, I wondered if that was you wanting to comment there.
Certainly, in relation to coronavirus, to my knowledge, the work has almost exclusively been done with local resilience partnership partners, which would not include community councils, but in relation to incidents such as severe weather, then local communities are very heavily involved in that and form a key part of any resilience and business continuity arrangements.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
Right, we'll move on to page 28, please.
It was just to do with this cash handling, and obviously there was very little cash handled, but you did make the point, Cathy, that in future there might be more. Was it because there was so much partnership working that nobody really knew who had the responsibility for telling the staff about this? Was that council, VAA? I don't know.
No, I don't think that was the reason. I think the reason was that people just didn't fill in the forms when they should have, and didn't record information right at the point in the process that they should have recorded it. And what that does is just leaves it open for the potential for things to go missing, or things not to be, you know, afterwards people don't know what happened because the forms weren't completed at the point where they should have been.
Right.
Okay. Right then, on to general comments. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, convener. I was just very pleased to see that the counter fraud team member returned to the team on the 6th of July. I think it's very important that the resources are given to the team so they can tackle the ongoing issues of fraud, which unfortunately seem to be on the increase.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. Cathy, you've already touched on the question I had, which was around resources. I mean, obviously the team were already under pressure prior to the pandemic. You've reacted really well, and I'd like to congratulate you on what you've achieved given the circumstances. But it's obviously very important that we have a robust programme going forward, and we could be facing further periods of lockdown, etc. Do you feel that the service is adequately resourced, and is this something that the council should be looking at urgently?
I think if we get the member of staff who's currently still supporting the emergency team back full time, then that will make a big difference, and we probably will be able to do sufficient work between now and when I need to report at the end of this year. One of the difficulties that we have had, we were already having a bit of an issue before COVID-19 hit in terms of people's capacity to respond to us in a timely manner. That's just become much more difficult now, just because people just have got so much else that they're looking at. You'll see the next paper is around the plan and what I'm proposing to do with that. And I think right at the moment, I think we can still do things, but it depends how well it goes in the next 2 or 3 months. We have got 2 or 3 pieces of work that are out in draft report, which will definitely be coming to the next meeting. But it's just how quickly we're able to get through some of the other work. I've been looking at trying to see whether we can scope some of the things slightly differently, just so that they're smaller pieces of work, but we'll still get good assurance from them. And obviously there's a number of things which we'll see in the next paper have been added because they're COVID-19 related, just in terms of some of the risks that have come there. I would say that the team is right on the border of just having enough resource. Yeah. But then we've said that a few, you know, but that's something that we've recognised in the past as well.
Okay, right. Councillor Miles, general comment?
Yes, in some ways it's similar to Councillor Whiteside. My question really was just, obviously you're trying to get back to normal proceedings when the ease of lockdown, but with this recent now new restrictions coming in place, does that give you any concern that you'll get the things back to normal again? And I have a final question that could be for Ian Lorimer if he's still on. But you can answer that one first.
I think from my perspective, my team are all working at home and have been working at home right from in fact, we were all working at home the week before the actual lockdown came into place. And I think that the type of work that we do lends itself to being able to be undertaken in that way, perhaps more so than some of the more front-facing work does. I don't think that the additional lockdown at the moment is going to cause us any particular difficulty. It will be if the new lockdown measures impinge on the capacity of other people to be able to engage with us, that's where the difficulty will come in. At the moment, I'm not seeing that, but obviously time will tell.
Okay, thanks for that. And the other question was the allocation we got for the food fund. If we don't use it all, which we haven't been doing, do we have to pay this back, or do we retain the money we got?
Mr. Lorimer?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, there's 2 lots of food fund. The one that's referred to here, the 602, is not repayable, but there are further tranches that have come through that would be repayable if we don't use them. But I know colleagues are looking at ways that we can try and make sure that we make the maximum use of that funding as best we can. So that's the current position on that. If I could just add, convener, the discussion there in terms of the resourcing for internal audit and the coverage around assurance. I'm obviously interested in that in terms of my statutory role. So Cathy and I have had a discussion about keeping the resourcing position under review, and if that meant having to augment that resource, then that's something that we would look to do or bring back to council for consideration. As Cathy says, sometimes that is not so much about the resources in the internal audit team as the capacity of other officers across the council, but that's something I'm keeping an eye on, as well as Cathy in her role as Chief Internal Auditor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorimer. Right, two hands up. First one is Councillor Devine. Unmute, Councillor Devine, if you got no? No, right, okay. In that case, it's Councillor Bell.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the emergency food fund, because those figures actually don't reflect the level of food that was given out across the partnership through the third sector, through organisations like VAA and Social Supermarket. There were many thousands of pounds spent on emergency food for people. So that's maybe a conversation that will be taken forward through the resilience work and the ongoing activity, the heart, around where that food is funded from as we go forward. And there were sort of local food hubs that were set up as well. Members of the public contributed to a crowdfunder for that. So this, I think, is what came through the council, what was delivered through the council. It doesn't reflect the whole picture. And I will find out some information around what was spent in the third sector. I think colleagues might find that quite interesting. So I just wanted to add that in to let you know that's not the full picture. And Cathy had covered the point that I was going to ask about the Pupil Equity Fund. So thanks for that. And I think Scrutiny and Audit would be open, I'm sure, to have that conversation around prioritising workload because of capacity and understanding the situation that we all find ourselves in.
Thank you. Right, is that everybody? Anybody else want to comment? No. Page 12, the recommendations. We're recommended to note the update on the progress, note management progress in implementing internal audits, etc. Agree that a full review of the internal audit charter be delayed. Note the update to the housing regulators, scrutiny arrangements, and note the Audit Scotland COVID-19 for guide for audit and risk committees. Do we agree these recommendations?
Agreed.
Can we proceed to page 41 and agenda item number 5? Cathy, that's you again.
Okay, thank you. This follows on really from some of the discussion that we've just had around the work that the team needs to do in 2021. What I've done is in the tables that are starting on page 48, I've pulled together everything that had not been completed from the 1920 plan and everything that was in the 2021 plan that was agreed back in March. And I've also added in some of the new things that have been identified because of the change in risk profile and some of the things that we've done around COVID-19. And if you look at the table that starts on page 48, it's quite obvious that we can't possibly do all of that work between now and sort of April, May next year to be reporting in June at the end of this current year. What I'm proposing is that we use this as a pool, because we have spoken to a number of people who've said, yeah, that's still a valid audit. We would still like that piece of work to be done, but can you do it at the end of the year? Because we can't cope with you coming to do it just now. And obviously we can't do everything at the end of the year. We'll have to do something now. So my plan would be to pull things from this, using risk as my first identifier in terms of where I would like to go next. But if people can't accommodate that, to just move on and pull something else from this, so that we are actually moving through the plan and getting as much of this work done between now and March, April next year as we possibly can. And I will keep an overview of the balance of the areas that we're covering, and at any point, if I think that we're getting to the point where we're not getting through this quick enough to be able to have a sufficient amount of work done, then I would bring that back and discuss that with you.
Thank you. All right, bids for questions. Whoops, hold it. I just lost my screen there. Okay, bids for questions. No, it's gone again. That's it now. Right, bids for questions. Nobody want to question item 5? In that case, can we go
For
back?
McDonald, I think, convener.
Okay, I haven't seen that one. Right, yes. Councillor MacDonald.
Just really quick, and it might be a bit daft, but it's page 53.
Anyone else? Right, Councillor MacDonald, page 53.
No, it's just when we talked about the new risks and the increased risks, and it says increased risk area mobile SIM cards. Is that as a result of the COVID response and folk working from home, or is there more information about why that's become an increased risk area to look into?
Yeah, I've added that in there because there was an increase in the use of mobile SIM cards right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it just seemed like something that I would want. It'll be a really short piece of work just to make sure that there's proper controls in place so that we know who's getting these and what's happening with them, and it's not possible for them to just kind of find their way places that they shouldn't do.
Anyone else? Kathy, I've got a couple of questions on page 56, which is where current risk scores have increased considerably from last year. Would these be the priorities for future audit?
Yeah, so we've taken these into consideration, and actually this is the corporate risk register, and actually the first one there, that current risk score is now up at 20. I think Ian had rescored that recently. So yeah, these were taken into consideration when we were trying to focus the work that we were doing, and that's why we've included, for example, a number of things that are around our response to the pandemic into the work that we're doing, because the risk score there is at 20, and also IT, cyber, resilience, etc. That score's gone up significantly just because of the amount of change there's been around that, and we do have work planned around that as well, just to see what we've done and make sure that it's following good practice.
Okay, in that case, can I just ask everybody to, at their leisure, have a look at that and bear it in mind when the next report comes out, when Kathy starts telling us what she's actually managing to do. Meantime, we're asked to note the proposed changes and consider and approve the proposed changes. Are those recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Now we come to the National Fraud Initiative, and that's just Kathy again.
Okay, thank you. This report is just bringing you up to date with what has been reported by Audit Scotland in the report on the National Fraud Initiative for 2018-19, and it's just giving you some information around what's been reported nationally against what we in the council have found in the work that the counter fraud team has undertaken. Ewan is with us today, so if there's any specific questions on this, he should be able to answer those. But I think if I just draw your attention to a couple of things in here. First of all, on page 59, we've got a summary of the various types of category of frauds that were being investigated through this, with the national value and the value of what was found in the testing for Angus Council. There's some information there about them, and just to say that where it's possible to try and make recovery of any of these things that have been identified, then we are taking action to try to do that. And the other thing is just to say that in terms of next year, we're in the process of planning that work, and that is underway at the moment. The information's being gathered to be passed over for the matching to be undertaken. And just for your information, because it's relevant to you, there is within the information published by Audit Scotland, there are some checklists around what you should be thinking about when you're looking at the NFI process. And part A of that guidance is around things that those charged with governance should be thinking about. So we've given you some information there from page 61, just around the things that you should be thinking about and what we think has been done within the council. And obviously, if there's any further information that you want around those, then hopefully you or others will be able to provide that just now, or we can come back to you later on if there's anything that you want to ask about. But it's really just to give you an overview of the national reporting for the year.
Well, can I now ask you and Richie to come in? I mean, Ewan sent myself and the vice convener some details on fraudulent attempts. Ewan, would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, the fraudulent attempts that we've encountered were in the business grants applications. We've established that there are 25 suspicious applications at this point, and we've referred these to Police Scotland. Of the 25, 19 haven't been paid because they were intercepted by our revenues officers. 2 were paid but were largely recovered by an intervention by the banks, and 4 have been what you might call successful frauds, and we've paid out £52,500 in these perpetrated frauds. Now, these have all been reported to Police Scotland in order that they can take any necessary action, and have been supplying Police Scotland with additional information that would assist their inquiries also.
Right, thank you very much for that, Ewan. I really don't want to go into that too much depth, because these are obviously probably current cases under investigation.
That's right.
Duff, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I appreciate you don't want any detail there, convener, but I mean, just the basic question is, if a fraud was proven, would the council stand to lose, or would effectively the government lose? I guess that's my question.
Ewan, Cathy, possibly Ewan's the one to answer that one. Who would lose, the council or the government?
Well, I'm not sure I'm in a position to authoritatively say. I think Cathy may be able to. I think it may be monies we've been given by the Scottish Government. So it may be that, but Cathy could give more information.
Cathy or Mr. Lorimer, either or?
I think Mr. Lorimer could probably answer that more definitively.
Thank you. Through you, convener, just to confirm, the business grant scheme, the council was effectively an agent of the Scottish Government in the administration of that scheme. I think it's recognised nationally because of the speed at which that scheme was put in place for obvious reasons at speed. Then the kind of controls that were able to be applied were probably less than what we would ideally have. But there are good sound reasons for that in terms of the timescale and the urgency with which the issue had to be addressed. But to answer Councillor Duff's question, no, I don't expect Angus Council to be impacted by those, providing we have done a reasonable level of diligence in trying to protect those public funds. And as Mr. Ritchie has mentioned, we've intercepted quite a number of attempted frauds, but there have been 1 or 2 that have managed to unfortunately get through. But as long as we've been applied the diligence that can be expected of us in the circumstances, I don't expect that to be a financial impact on Angus Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Can I just add something to that? We did previously report that we'd looked at the procedures that were in place, and we thought that they were adequate and sufficient in terms of what we'd been asked to do. And we have done another piece of work that is now complete but hasn't been reported to you yet, just looking at some of the activity around this, and we'll bring that to the next meeting.
Councillor Salmon, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I had a few questions on this, but I do appreciate this is an area you may not want us to discuss at the moment. But one question, if possible, for Mr. Ritchie. What alerted us to these 25 fraudulent attempts?
Well, there was, thank you for the question, there was a staff vigilance process that required staff to consider local knowledge, to check our existing records, to contact applicants and to contact landlords and such like. And during that process, that was how it was inquiries such as those that caused the 19 to be identified. And it was for the perpetrated frauds, the two that were where the bank intervened. Obviously, the bank intervention made us aware of them. And for the 4 perpetrated frauds, it was the realisation too late that these were frauds that meant we were unable to reject the applications. And that's how these have managed to get through. It was only in retrospect, on a re-examination, that it was found that they were fraud or suspected fraudulent.
Thank you.
I think I would ask that once all this has been finally dealt with and any court proceedings are complete, we get a report into the actual details of the frauds. I appreciate that there's probably a lot of people out there trying to get money, but I found the process, when I acted on behalf of 2 charitable organisations I'm a member of, I found it quite tedious for a start, but then it got very easy by the time I did the 3rd one. Right, anything further on item 6? No, we're asked to consider, yes. Sorry?
Yes, Councillor King, page 59.
59.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Right, it's on the 233 blue badges. First of all, that seems cancelled. That seems a wee bit high for Angus. Is that the normal number that would be cancelled in a year? And the other value attached to them, I can appreciate in other councils where you have congestion charges. 575 might be an appropriate figure, but it seems a rather high figure to attribute to our blue badge cancellation. So
I know that the figure is purely a nominal pan-Scotland figure.
Yeah.
Whether you charge or not, it's accredited to you. But can anybody comment on the number of blue badges?
I can, convener. It's not an unusual number. As I recall, in the previous exercise, it was 149, and they relate to deceased persons who have died who held a blue badge.
We appreciate that, but to put a nominal figure of 134,000 against these badges when it doesn't relate to what the Angus charges would be, seems a wee bit high.
I think, can I ask for some of the officers to explain the fact that this is a pan of Scotland thing, which is applied whether you have parking charges or not?
I can, convener. Yes, that is correct. The 575 is a national figure that's applied to all badges. The reason that it was mentioned at all in this report was to give a comparison with the national value.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? In that case, we are asked to consider, note and note. Do we agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Can we move on now to item number 7? And I'm quickly looking up and down to see who's here to take that one.
That would be me, convener.
Gordon Cargill, is it? Or is it
yes,
you?
Convener. Yep, I'll take that one. Thanks, convener. Yes, item 7 is the update to the council's change programme. This was considered at Policy and Resources also on 1st of September. So for this committee's information and scrutiny in terms of progress, the update to the change programme also provides information on how the change programme savings have been affected by the pandemic, and I'll just briefly touch on that as I talk through. Our reporting this year on the change programme has been not as fulsome as we would normally do. This is us playing catch up a bit because of the pandemic. I think we missed the cycle of reporting, so apologies for that, but we'll endeavour to keep on top of it from now on in. The progress update in section 4 highlights really where we are in terms of the impact of the pandemic, where in February when we set the budget for 2021, we were looking at 10.244 million of savings, which as a result of a review of the projects and some of the slippage and changes as a result of the pandemic has reduced significantly by 1.2 million this year, and the impact overall, the 3-year period, sitting at a reduction of over, just about almost 1.6 million, albeit within 21-22 and 22-23. There's a beneficial position in 22-23, but it's just basically down to project slippage. So overall, quite a material reduction, albeit the Director of Finance, Mr. Lorimer, obviously picked up this information from this report as part of the overall budget recast report, which was considered at Council on 10th of September. So those numbers are incorporated within, those new numbers are incorporated within that updated budget recast position. The overall summary of the detail, if you like, behind all the projects is included within Appendix 1 to the report. What we have done for this report, and I think it was something that members previously highlighted, that they were keen to see a bit more around what's the risk in terms of delivery across the whole programme. So we've added the table in to section 4.5 just to give a sense of what that is, and we just highlight that in terms of where we are currently, we're in terms of completed projects, we've got 33% completed and budgets removed, if you like. There's obviously the Health and Social Care Partnership and Angus Alive, the issues that they've suffered as a result in both these organisations in dealing with the pandemic from a financial position still places these organisations in terms of delivery of savings as anticipated at the start of the year at high risk, and obviously we're working with colleagues on that to address that and have a firmer position on that as we work through that throughout the rest of this financial year. We also have projects that are still in progress that are not yet completed, which represents around 15% of the change programme, which we're really working hard to get nailed down as quickly as we can now, and we've categorised that as kind of medium risk area, albeit a lot of work going on to conclude that. Moving down the report into section 5, there's if you like, an audit trail of the shift between the the earlier figure of 10.24 million and the reduction down to the 9 million for this year. So that table in section 5.1 just gives the full shift in numbers so that members can see how that's moved. A couple of things that we just highlight within that. There's the procurement and commissioning project, which has reduced quite significantly, and also the Agile programme for this financial year has shifted a bit as well, albeit overall it's only a change of 2,000. In terms of that procurement and commissioning project, as I understand it, there has been an increase in the price of the cost of goods and such like, and at this stage, the downgrading, if you like, of what we're anticipating to get from that project is a kind of taking a prudent approach to that one at this stage, rather than being overly optimistic what might come out of that. I think in terms of the Agile programme, there's quite a number of dimensions to that, which relate to delay in construction activity to move that project forward throughout the pandemic period. I think there's also, now that we're trying to find what the new normal is, there's also potentially a different approach to the spatial needs of the organisation now, which is we're looking at work styles and reviews and how we can actually build on Agile 1 to take us to another level on Agile. So we're working with colleagues through the detail of that as we speak. And I think the third dimension is just around really the potential for that we might also need in the short term some of our property estate that we thought we might be able to dispose of. And I think linked to that also is the fact that when we do come to dispose of properties that are surplus now, there might also be a shifting marketplace around some of that real estate. So we just have to be mindful, I think, around the risk on that bit of the Agile programme. Moving down through the report, just briefly then, there's updates in section 6 around how we're using the change fund monies and also monies that we've set aside to support Taste City's deal through that fund. There's details in the report about how we're spending those funds. And finally, I would just round up the report in section 8 by saying that we're now at a stage in this financial year that we're really starting to think about what comes next and how we'll actually start to develop our change programme again to not only close out this financial year like to, but also start to think about bringing in the next 3-year planning period, and importantly how we meet the budget gap next financial year. And we're certainly turning our minds and attention now to how we'll actually go about doing that. That's over, convener, and happy to take any questions.
Fine, Councillor Duff, any page number?
Yeah, page number is 64, convener.
Councillor Bell, page number?
64, please.
Okay, Councillor Duff, would you like to start off on page 64?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Mr. Cargill, for his explanations. I'm just thinking about the sort of the COVID impacts on the projects, and I guess there's possibly three issues. We know that the pandemic has probably increased costs for both Angus Alive and the Health and Social Care Partnership, and we've also got the issue that what is the new normal, and some of our planned changes may now not be appropriate. I guess there's a third thing, that certain changes that we were working on are going to be delayed by the project, but by the 6 month, whatever, maybe longer shutdown. So we've kind of got a whole series of different effects, all of which is making it difficult and complex. And I think the red, amber, green is helpful, but I'm just conscious that we may have, I mean, for example, are the projects in progress, have they been delayed because of effectively the shutdown and everyone's working from home and it's going to be very difficult to progress things, or not?
I would say on the projects in progress that we're confident we can secure these. It's just a timing issue in terms of actually getting the detail from colleagues, but we're working hard, and I think there's although we're saying medium, I think there's a strong level of confidence that we can secure these projects this year.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Thanks, Gordon. Just on page 64 in the table in 4.5, could I ask that as for future reports we separate out the Health and Social Care Partnership and Angus Alive? There's not an equivalence around either what they do or how those situations might resolve. And I just think it would be more helpful to see them as separate listings. Would you be able to do that?
Yes, happy to take that on board, Councillor Bell, and I'll do that for the next report.
Could you break down the 4.702 million, just drop an email to all members?
I'll do that, convener.
What is attributable to the Social Care Partnership and what's attributable to Angus Alive?
Yes, happy to do that, convener.
Right. Anything further on item 7? Right. We are asked to scrutinise and note the updated savings. Do we agree with the recommendations?
Agree.
Thank you. Mr. Lorimer, Treasury Management Report.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, this is the standard annual report that we bring. It's a requirement of the legislation and the Treasury Management Code to bring a report, an annual report on our Treasury activities for the previous year. So the committee gets this type of report each year. I suppose there's quite a lot in the report, but in terms of headlines, we didn't need to borrow at all in 2019-20 financial year. Effectively, that's postponed borrowing. The fact that we had some slippage in our capital programme. We had some underspends on our revenue budgets. That's resulted in us having higher cash balances, temporary cash balances, than we would have expected to have had. And we've been able to postpone that borrowing because, you know, the borrowing brings an interest charge. And the longer we can delay that interest charge having to be paid, then the better that is. That is a balancing act, I think, as I've advised the committee in previous years. If interest rates are looking like they're going to be on the rise, then that strategy can cost you if you don't get the timing right. But of course, the interest rate environment is now really quite different, even from where we were at the end of the financial year that's under review here. Table 5, page 77 of the report, there's several loans have matured within the year. There's a couple of those go back to the 1980s, believe it or not, which just gives a sense of how long-term treasury decisions, particularly those around borrowing, how long-term those decisions are. Our loans pool rate, so that's the internal rate that we pay on our borrowing, was slightly above budget for 1920, but overall we made a saving on our loan charges budget because we had less borrowing overall. We did, again, as the report outlines in terms of our investment return, we've exceeded that, our kind of target and our benchmark on that. So we've outperformed the rates there. That definitely won't be the case in the current financial year because the interest rate environment has changed so markedly, and effectively there's very little return to be made on temporary cash in the current circumstances. You'll see from the report that our overall debt has reduced. I think that number needs to be interpreted carefully because, in effect, we've not borrowed when we have an underlying need to borrow, and effectively we've postponed the borrowing. So that debt figure is a bit of a false position in terms of where we're actually heading in the longer term. The treasury position for 1920 was largely unaffected by the pandemic. Most of the impact happened right at the very end of the financial year, but the impact in the current year is more significant, and that will be the subject of further reports. We have arranged further treasury management training for the 2nd of November. That will be virtual training using MS Teams, I think. And I'm hopeful that as many members as possible can attend that because it's an important subject, none more so than in the current circumstances and environment. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour, convener of the main points in the report, but happy to try and answer any questions that members of the committee might have. Thank you.
Okay, bids for questions. Councillor Duff, which page, please?
Pages 73, 74 and 80.
Councillor Boyd, and page, please.
There'll be a general comment at the end.
Councillor Miles, pages?
General, but also page 77.
77, general. Okay, Councillor Braze?
Yes, pages 74 and 75, please.
Okay. Councillor Whiteside?
Page 77, please.
Right. Anyone else? No. Right. Can we start off with Councillor Duff, please? Pages 73 and 74.
Thanks, convener. I had a couple of questions on 73. I noticed the comment about the change in the lease issue, which I think we had discussed with Mr. Lorimer before. And obviously I'm conscious that we now have the potential changes in the common good arrangement. So I just wanted to ask about any training at some point, appropriate point for elected members. The second question I had on
We'll just take that one back.
One at a time, okay.
Lorimer first. I
Yep.
hadn't appreciated you were picking up a part of the report. Mr. Lorimer?
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yeah, so I think that the leases question that Councillor Duff mentions is a new international financial reporting standard number 16. Like many things, the implementation of that's been delayed because of COVID. So that will start to affect accounts from next financial year. But it is quite a significant change in how we account for leases in particular. So yes, there will be, whether it will be training or a briefing, we'll organise something because it will have quite a significant effect. I don't expect it to have a huge effect on the common good balance sheet, primarily because the common good is usually the lessor rather than the lessee. So we expect the kind of impact on assets and liabilities in balance sheets mainly to affect our general fund position. But as Councillor Duff mentions, the impact of the recent court judgment does mean that we have to review our accounting policies in relation to the treatment of common good assets. So we'll take that into account, obviously, as part of the preparations for IFRS 16 as well. So training or a briefing will certainly be provided, probably into next calendar year now, I would think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Page 74 now.
I've got another question on 73, convener.
Okay,
yeah,
fine.
I mean, just a query that the paragraph below that, it talks about the PWLB interest rates and the unexpected 1% increase. What was, I think, last year? In the current financial position, is that still been maintained, or has that been reversed? I mean, I would have thought, given the current bank rate, I'm a bit surprised to see that maybe hadn't been reversed.
Yeah, I'm not aware that it's been reversed, but obviously the interest rates fluctuate all the time based on what's happening. Can I double check that one for you, Councillor Duffin, just to be sure of what the position is?
Yep, thanks for that.
Right, page 74 then, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, it was really just the table at the bottom of 74, and I think Mr. Lorimer referred to this, that the sort of the investments that the council has got, and he's actually saying the net debt position is perhaps artificially small. I mean, the investment number always seems quite large, and I guess we know that we haven't had to borrow, which has been noted. Is that just a sort of a high point in a fluctuation? And I kind of sort of, to the lay person, it seems like we've got a lot of money there that's not actually earning us very much interest. And what is the sort of simple explanation why we've got so much money sitting there? And I know we've got more money borrowed. It's always slightly, I wouldn't say it concerns me, but it's always a bit intriguing.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Through you, convener. Yeah. So the 68 million number that's in the report, that's effectively a snapshot of our temporary cash balances on the balance sheet day on the 31st of March. Now those balances change on a daily basis, depending on the kind of incomings and outgoings from the council's bank account. So, for example, immediately after a payroll run, the level of cash balances is considerably less than it was prior to that. We also see fluctuations as we go through the financial year. So again, for example, in relation to council tax, we see a drop off in council tax income in February and March. Certainly for those people who pay their council tax over 10 months. So all of those things play into the kind of overall cash position. For a number of years, our policy approach has been to have our reserves, so our balance sheet reserves, our usable reserves, backed in cash. So we've actually got the cash in the bank to kind of sit behind those reserves. And those reserves at the end of the financial year were something like 41 million. The balance at the end of 1920 was a bit higher than we've seen in previous years, but really that's a product of a few things. Part of it is that we didn't spend the money that we budgeted to spend in 1920 on both our capital and our revenue budgets. But we've also continued to enjoy a kind of positive working capital position over quite a number of years. We're pretty good at collecting the monies that are due to us, and that's a factor. So it's a whole range of things. The one cash number obviously reflects lots of things that are happening across all of our areas and our budgets and our different parts of our accounts. So it's a snapshot position. It's a temporary cash position. A real, if I could call it, wealth or a resource is that's reflected in our accounts and in our balance sheet and in our usable reserves. So I hope that's helpful. It is quite a tricky area.
Yeah, I think that is a helpful summary and explanation, and appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Okay, Councillor Brays, you were on page 74 as well.
Yes, my question is on table 1 2.2 as well. We have no variable rate borrowing. Is this just as a matter of policy, or is it something that you would consider doing if you thought it was the right thing to do? And does Link advise you on this?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brays. Yeah, so our Treasury advisors, Link, do advise us on our strategy. We haven't had for probably quite a number of years, probably all of my time in this role, undertaken much in the way of variable borrowing at all. And that's really, there's obviously risk around variable borrowing because the rates can vary and they can move against you. And the other factor is really that fixed interest rates have been so attractive for quite a long period, probably before and since the financial crisis of 2008-9. And we can lock in at good long-term rates on a fixed basis. So that's tended to be the strategy that we've pursued. But variable rates is something that we keep under review, and if we felt that was the right approach, then we would borrow on a variable basis. Our Treasury policies do allow us to do that.
Yeah. Also in that, Ian, the PWLB, do they actually offer variable rate loans?
Yes, those are available. There's a variety of different terms and things that we can use. So yeah, there are a variety of routes that we have to secure any borrowing that we need, and we keep all of those under review in terms of our Treasury strategy.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Brays, page 75.
Yes, that one was on, that one's at 2.8 on 75.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, oh, I've lost it just there. Trying to get it back up, but it's awful slow today.
That's the one about administering the expenses.
Yeah, 2.8. Yeah, the council incurs expenses and administers this, and obviously, you know, we have to. These are large sums of money, and we need the best advice we can get. But I was wondering, we're saying that it's costing 0.1% from borrowing accounts. For the expenses of administering Treasury management. Is that 0.1% of the total amount of money we're borrowing or investing?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, it's a product of the cost of officer time, including my own time in terms of Treasury management activities, as over the level of indebtedness through the loans fund. So that number can vary depending on what the overall debt position is in any particular year. And I think that level has come down, and that has pushed up both the administration rate and the interest rate, which is in table 2 above in that on that page. So yes, the costs are really just in terms of officer time plus a bit of our Treasury advisors' time in running the loans fund. So it is a variable rate per annum. It doesn't tend to move quite as much as it has for 1920, but that's largely because the level of borrowing that is being divided, that cost is being divided into, is lower.
And how much of that figure goes to Link Asset Services?
It's somewhere between 15 and 20,000, I think, Councillor Braze, but I'd want to double check that just to be sure.
Advise Councillor Braze of that separately, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Ian.
Right, okay, Councillor Miles, page 77.
Yes, on the mature rate borrowing, delighted to see these old debts being repaid. I sincerely hope we weren't paying a 9% interest rate on them. Was that correct, first of all?
If you look back at when these debts were taken out and think about what interest rates were at that time, Councillor Miles.
Yeah. Well, it's delighted to see that getting rid of these, especially if that's such a high interest rate. And again, taken out in 1988-89, that was before the Unitary Authority was set up. So who had taken that out? Was that Angus District Council or whatever?
It could be that, or Tayside Region, or the police. There was a number of authorities that took out debts that passed on to Angus Council when Angus Council was formed.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lorimer, would you like to come in and just explain a wee bit more, especially in terms of 30-year debts and 40-year debts?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Kind of alluded to this in my introduction about the kind of long-term nature of Treasury management decisions. So yeah, 9% in the current environment looks like an awful rate, but I guess it was all about what were the circumstances at that time. And I'm sure whoever did the borrowing at that time would have regarded those rates as being the best that were available at that time. I don't know off the top of my head whether it would have been Tayside Region that would have borrowed those sums or whether it would have been Angus District, but those loans have obviously been in place for a long time. And as you say, Councillor Miles, it's good to have those off our books because that obviously affects the overall rate that we have to pay.
Yeah, and are there any similar old-time borrowings that are still outstanding at that type of rate?
Yeah, there are quite a number of longer-term loans and debts that are even at higher rates than those, which the premium that we would pay to repay those loans early would be too significant to make sense to do that. So we continue to pay those loans off on the basis that they are. The overall loans pool rate that's mentioned in the report takes into account all of the debt. So these small sums, although the interest rates were high, the sums of money involved are quite small. So it's the overall interest rate isn't massively impacted by these very long and older debts. The things that we've done on a bigger scale in terms of values more recently has a bigger influence.
Okay, I just appreciate you getting a far better rate nowadays. Thank you.
I mean, those of us who had mortgages in that period, the 1980s, can remember paying 15%. Right. Councillor Whiteside, you're on page 77 as well.
Thank you. It was just in relation to 3.5 and the fact that no new external borrowing was undertaken. I'm starting to find this a real worry, particularly as this relates to the previous financial year before the impact of the pandemic hit. And it seems to be a trend over the last few years. It's not a good news story. The interest rates are really low at the moment. We have an obligation to provide good quality housing, good quality schooling. We've got a real imbalance in our schooling estate. We've got Forfar and Brechin with amazing state-of-the-art community campuses, and yet we've got Montefieth really squashed into out-of-date accommodation. We've got other schools lining up to be done as well. I think we'll have to make a real effort to try and get the capital programme back on track. And obviously this current year, there's been nothing that we can do about the delays, which is making the situation even more urgent. So I just think it's not necessarily a good news story that we're not borrowing. We need to get these capital programmes moving.
That was more a general comment than a question, Councillor Whiteside.
Sorry.
It's quite all right. You're done now. Councillor Boyd.
Yes, and I was going to be making this as a comment, but I totally agree with Councillor Whiteside here. This is a good report, and I'm glad to see our finances are in Ian Lorimer's steady hands, making positive reading for a change. I've always said many, many times in these meetings that debt shouldn't be seen as a bad word, and very low rates should be seen as an opportunity. I'm glad that Councillor Duff questioned the interest rates and that Councillor Brays mentioned or asked questions on borrowing. Clearly, Councillor Miles doesn't understand the 30-year loan rates that we've been discussing. These low rates are here to stay for a long time to come. Let's start spending, making Angus a better place to work and live. Thank you.
Councillor Miles, you had a general comment as well. Unmute, Councillor Miles.
We'll get there. Right. The general comment was in this low interest rates, obviously we're losing out with investments, but it'll also help us when it comes to our borrowings. But again, not increasing our borrowing, to my mind, is a very good news story, because no matter what you're borrowing, you have to pay it back. And if we can keep our borrowing to a minimum, it's a good news story for those that follow us. They don't have to pay back the loans and the debts that we incur. So I think it's a very good news story that we're managing to keep our borrowings low. Thank you.
Well, in that case, I think Councillor Miles will send all the homeless people that are coming to us asking for houses, and you can explain to them why it's good not to borrow and not to build them houses.
I never said that, Councillor.
No, you said that it was good. You said it was good not to borrow and keep the thing down.
I said it was good not to increase our debt.
Unfortunately, to build new council houses, you have to increase your debt.
Here, here, Councillor King.
And you also build new schools, you have to increase your debt. And to build new roads, you have to increase your debt. So not increasing your debt means that you're just not getting on with anything. Right.
That is not the intention of what I was saying there. I was saying increase it untoward. We have to pay it back. It always has to be paid back. We have to invest, and we're going nowhere with this discussion.
Word untoward was not in your comment. Right. Can we move on? Well, first of all, can we look at the recommendations, which are to review and scrutinise and provide any comments?
Convener, I have a question on page 80.
Oh, sorry. So you did. I beg your pardon, because no.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, just a quick question about the external investments. I was quite interested to see we have a number of investments with neighbouring or other Scottish councils, which I have to be honest, I hadn't noticed before in previous, maybe I just missed it. So I'm just sort of asking Mr. Lorimer just the background there. Also, perhaps, how is this actually done? Is this done on a one-to-one basis with councils, or is there some sort of, I don't know what you would call it, something like a stock exchange, and they councils come there and say, we want to borrow £1 million, and somebody hooks them up with a council that has got money to invest. Just curious how this is actually done in practice.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. In terms of the lending between councils, that's usually organised through brokers, and because it depends on who's in the market on any particular day. So we have had some discussions, I think, over the years on a direct basis, but normally those arrangements are organised through brokers. I think the position at the end of 2019-20 was a little bit unusual in terms of the lending to other councils, probably being higher than we've seen in previous years. The ability to lend to, and we're talking about lending of temporary cash balances on a temporary basis here, so I want to be clear about that. Yeah. That's always been an option for us in terms of our treasury policies and strategies. So other councils are an agreed counterparty, as we call them, for temporary lending. So that's the first thing to say. It's a product, I think, of different councils being in different places with their treasury strategies. So we happen to have surplus cash balances. There might be other councils that don't. There might be other councils that are effectively running down those internal balances. They're looking to effectively kind of deal with their cash flows on a temporary basis, but ahead of borrowing for the longer term. So different councils employ different treasury strategies. These are things that we might want to cover in the upcoming training on the 2nd of November. There's a few good points, I think, that have come out of the questions today. So I've made a note of those, and we can pick those up as part of the treasury training. I suppose what I would say in terms of lending to other councils, the rates that have been on offer there have been good. The risk of default with another council is pretty low. And effectively, we've taken the view that we will take advantage of those circumstances. We're in a good cash position. Others have a different set of circumstances. So you know, it works for both us and other councils. So yeah, it's something we've done over the years. At the 31st of March this year, there was more borrowing to other councils than what we've seen in the past, but I'm not unduly concerned by that at all, because we always take those decisions on the basis of you know, security, liquidity and yield in that order. Thank you.
Just on that, Mr. Lorimer, I note that a number of the loans, the maturity date is in the past. Can I ask, have all of these loans been redeemed? Because it's over half the total amount.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. There's not been any issues at all with any of our counterparties in repaying sums that have been lent. So those that were in the past here have all been repaid, and may well have been replaced by new loans with councils. So that position changes on a daily basis.
Thank you. All right. Is there anything else on that one? Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. And finally, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers, Scotland Act. I think this is probably Mr. Thompson, is it?
Yes, thank you, Convener. This report advises the Committee of the use of surveillance powers by the Council under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000 in the period 1st April 2019 to 31st March 2020. I don't really have anything to add to the report, but I would be happy to take any questions.
Right, bids for questions? Everybody happy with the report? We're asked to note several aspects. Do we agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much for your forbearance. It's been a shorter meeting than normal, but nevertheless, it's been a lot of important stuff. So we shall see you all again sometime.
Thank you, Convener.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.